about serving the membership. Associations of realtors. Associations, to me, there's power in association. And these are big organizations. And so we say, are we serving the member? But for me, and I was president of my local board in 1993, and it's always the big thing. We always think about it. We always talk about it. We're always serving the member. That's the idea. But as I started to think about this, thought about this over the years, you know, who is the membership? And as you look at an association of realtors, a couple things you have to keep in mind is, number one, it has a perpetual existence. It has a past, it has a present, and it has to have a future. So it's an organization that has a perpetual existence. It's also an organization that has a continuum of membership. It has people who were members in the past. As a matter of fact, people who are leaders of associations of realtors here today are standing on the shoulders of giants, people who've done things in the past. And so we have people who served in the past and who make the organization what it is. We have people who are serving now, and we have people that we, National Association of Realtors, have to get ready for in the future. So this idea of serving the membership, I think, is a more complex question than just serving the current members. And if we say serving the current members who sell real estate, there are also other members who do other things in the organization. And
well, why should the organization give a hoot about people who don't actually sell real estate?
Good question. But what is the vision and what is the mission?
I mean, the organization, I mean, if you think about the core mission of the organization, and I respect everything you said, I respect your enthusiasm and your sock game, by the way. Why, I mean, isn't that the problem? Isn't the problem to some extent that the designation of realtor got diminished by the fact that the barriers to entry were so low that we have 1 million of them, or 1.2 million, or however many there are of them, of whom most of them are not what one would neutrally and objectively call a professional real estate advisor, consultant, whatever. Isn't that the problem?
I think one of the...
Yes.
You say yes, but I want to hear yeah, because you're going to defend
this. Well, it's part of the problem, but I think as we look at the way that this has evolved over the years, that the membership provides all these different kinds of benefits for different people, and the mission is to serve the membership. And my point is, when you're talking about it, which membership are we? Let's define the membership, and then we can have a conversation about, right?
Fair enough. How would you define and divide up the membership? How would you do that?
Well, I said NAR does a pretty good job right now, divided up into categories, but then it's how many resources do you get?
What categories do they divide?
Well, you get residential sales, and then, right?
Well, but I mean, residential sales it's a big...
Are you talking about those that sell and those that don't sell?
Well, I'm just saying he's opened the door of the idea that we need to serve a membership, and the membership includes a lot of people who don't actually engage in the practice of selling real estate. And I'll be honest, in my local boards, not to single any particular, I'm a member of like 9 boards or whatever. You see a lot of people that come up and take leadership positions that are making decisions that affect my livelihood who haven't sold a house in 10 years.
So to talk about what you said, you had mentioned something about top heavy to bottom heavy. And what we're here to talk about is not should it exist, but should it be reorganized? And my question is, because of the inconsistencies, it came about by a lot of small organizations joining together to become a big association. So at this point, the way as it is evolved, should it be coming from the top to bring consistency to the bottom, and would that help the member benefit of what a professional association is supposed to be?
I would say so. I mean, I think it's, I know what you're going to say, talking about the licensing part of it. If it was top down and it handled licensing, you know, obviously there's a huge value there because it's that whole barrier to entry, right? Anyone can get it, but also the fact that there are different levels. I want to go back to what you were saying, though, really quickly about the levels of membership, because I do think that there are conversations like a student membership. Is there a membership for people that don't sell, don't ever plan to sell, but then there's this part for them? Or is that getting into the weeds, and is it doing what it's supposed to be doing as it's structured?
You talk about the organization of real estate, or the real estate industry, there's all these different pieces. And so I think the benefit is more than just the people who sell in the streets, also benefit to the consumer. But there's no doubt that real estate associations is like oligarchies, right? Where you have it's true, you have a small number of people making decisions for the greater whole. And oftentimes the reason you have that is because the greater whole doesn't want to take part and spend the time, and you get some people that will, and as long as everything's still good, it just continues. And if things aren't so good, then you start to see new blood get involved and new people get involved.
You used a term that is used all the time, and I think it's really important to distinguish the words. You used professional association. NAR is not a professional association. It's a trade association that mirrors on the border of a union, because in essence, it is a gatekeeper to practice. And if you want to elevate it to a professional association, where the consumer looks at it as an elevated ability to provide services, there has to be a distinguishing factor between the haves and the have-nots, and the members and the non-members, who are actually engaged with consumers. And until that happens, you will never have the organization be deemed a professional association.
Oh, want to hear a question from there?
So are you proposing then that the haves make more money and the have-nots don't?
The question is, are you proposing that the haves make more money and the have-nots?
And that was Valerie Garcia, I believe, asking that question.
I'm proposing that consumers will decide that fact. And and consumers are who we all have to serve, and they're really smart. And if there's a distinguishing factor between a realtor and a non-realtor, which today there isn't, consumers will eventually, it's not going to happen overnight, eventually when the realtor and the non-realtor are sitting at the kitchen table fighting over a listing, they'll choose the realtor over the non-realtor, and they will make more money.
You were saying something? You were looking at me to say
Yeah,
something? Jump in.
I was going to say something about the way that the organization is structured, right? That there are these different levels, and at each one of these levels, these are all separate corporate entities. And when they share a brand, they share the Realtor brand, but my association in San Diego is the San Diego Association of Realtors, a separate corporation from other local associations and a national association. These are all separate corporate entities that have their own articles of incorporation and bylaws and bank accounts and profit and local dues. So when we have conversations about reorganization, which by the way, NAR has been working on this reorganization for years. You might remember maybe about 10 years ago, they introduced new management for associations of realtors. They went from 3 different levels: leadership level, and a management level, and an administrative level. And really what we've started to see is more staff-driven as opposed to volunteer-driven associations. Now, the volunteers are still involved, but there was a movement a number of years ago to move associations into this leadership model, which puts staff as opposed to realtors. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other.
The only thing about all that is you're talking a lot about rearranging deck chairs on that there's going to be different groups, and that's all internal to NAR, to NAR. It's all internal to NAR. It doesn't mean anything to a consumer. I mean, you know, whether someone's in this organization, or this strata, that strata, this strata, what matters to them is that this person's wearing the R, and that signals to them that they are a realtor, or realtor, however it's pronounced, that they're a member of the association, and such, they are a professional, or at least the theory is that they're a professional real estate agent. Like, this isn't the point of this, that we should be focusing not so much on like internal, like all the different internal pieces that go with this, but like what does this mean to the public, not the million realtors, but the 250 million people that we're trying to service?
I say that's always up to me as a realtor, as somebody who sold a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
That I would make a point that I got a broker's license early on because I wanted to make the distinction between myself and the other people that had sales licenses and didn't have broker's license. I tell you this, the public doesn't know the difference in a salesperson and a broker, but I had, in my presentation to them, I made sure they understood that. And the same thing with Real, I made sure they understood that. And when I got my ePro designation, I made sure they understood that. So I agreed, and we've talked about this for years, that Realtor and Kleenex kind of went together. I actually see it going a little bit better to where people are starting to make that distinction, but that's been an issue for many years, why we have this media campaign on a year after year, right?
So going back to the core question, is anything going to change in the eyes of the consumer if NAR does not change?
No. When consumers see Get Realtor, they hear Get Real Estate Agent. That's what they hear. And until there's a change, until there's a separation between realtor and non-realtors in a truly substantial way, which People say, well, wait a second, there's 2 million licensees in the country, 1.2, so there's 60% or 40% that are non-realtor. Those 40% don't practice.
What's the fundamental change that's going to happen within the leadership to achieve that distinction?
Two things. MLSs no longer require membership in the realtor organization to get MLS services. Therefore, it's no longer a gatekeeper to being a cooperative part of this industry, because if you don't have MLS access and you're on the resencial side, you're not in the business.
But how does that solve the problem? What you're saying then is that, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make NAR membership voluntary, so you can join the local board, not be a member of NAR. So now, what if you want to be a sort of a negative perspective on it, what little gatekeeping responsibility that NAR has now, what little in terms of implementing code of ethics and things like that, that we're now even taking that away, and we're taking the people who don't want to be members and we're setting them adrift. Yeah, that seems to be a worse situation.
That becomes the wild, wild west.
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay, so
I'm not. So the three-way agreement doesn't change. So the three-way agreement, which basically says when you want to be a member of the Realtor Association, you have to belong to the local, state, and national. That doesn't change. Okay, so this is not an NAR discussion. This is a realtor discussion. That make sense?
I'm not very smart.
So what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, I believe that when somebody enters the business and they start working for your company, they should have a choice, right? And that choice should be, I either want to be a realtor, be able to wear the pin, which means I'm a member of your local association, state, and national. That doesn't change. Or I choose not to be.
And what happens if I choose not to be? What's happening?
Then over time, there'll be the people that aren't and the people that are. And if the Realtor Association does a great job of branding around that and showing the difference, consumers will start figuring it out.
I want to go back to the point about MLS and realtor organizations. In California, you do not have to be a member of the realtor organization to access the MLS. And we have a certain number of people who have licenses that are MLS members only and not members of the association. So we've removed that, or the courts have removed that for us in California, and yet we still have pretty good participation at the organizational level. Even though you could do this without being a realtor in California now.
That's because of the dues billing policy. So, I mean, yes, in California and in other states, they don't require membership, but then NAR says if you're a broker and the broker wants to be a realtor member, then they're essentially on the hook financially for every licensee in their company, whether they join or not. So, effectively, economically, you're forcing membership.
I want to hear Jennifer's comments on this.
I can't get off the part of if you join a brokerage and you say, okay, you can join or you don't join. Okay, so I belong and I adhere to the code of ethics, and the person next to me doesn't, and now I'm in a transaction with that person. Well, what then? I mean, the whole thing I look at is if it does become this voluntary thing, then you have another, meeting in the coffee shop and they're creating a new association. And is that really going to prove, is that going to be better? I don't think so. Now it's like, like whatever that is, franchised or whatever, and you got all these groups of people that are meeting and creating associations, and I just think that's going to be worse for the industry.
So again, the change, I think, if we're going to take an idea like Russ's idea and not charge dues, that's not something that, or make it not mandatory, that's not something you can do overnight, because then all of a sudden everything stops. And so if in fact you had that in mind, it seems to me that you have to do this through a structure, and that you need to do this through this leadership structure. And I get back to this continuum of leadership idea, that there is a continuum of leadership. If in fact there is a better model and people sit down and can create a better model, then you still need to move that model through. That's a leadership issue, and you have to do certain things in leadership. And I've seen many changes go through leadership. Just the whole organization hasn't been redone.
What's the problem we're trying to solve? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Somebody.
It's the same thing that has been going on for generations, right?
Which is? Just articulate the problem, because we've been
The problem is,
dancing
I
around a lot
think
of
it's
stuff.
every what, probably 10 or 12 years, the world changes around, and then everyone says, oh gosh, is there a relevance for NAR, and it should be reorganized. I mean, that's, it's like, it's same story, different.
So I would pose this. Professions, and whether it's the real estate profession or doctors or architects, they all have professional associations, and I know your definition is that, but let's use those words for now. So they all have professional associations. There's a value to professions to have organized associations. Is the problem with NAR is that they have taken too many things under their purview that falls out of the definition of a professional association, and that's where some of the restructuring needs to go, because we're getting into these muddy waters of MLSs. For example, in my region, I'm in one of the biggest MLSs in the country. A couple of years ago, it went from association-owned to broker-owned, but then they cut a deal so that you still have to be a realtor member to be a member, and there's still a kickback to the association because the problem was the dues revenue. So,
Andrea, we got a pile of people on
okay.
Okay.
So that would be my next question is that what we need to redefine? What is a professional association in our industry?
So if we wanted to redefine this for something that actually matters to people other than realtors, so the consumer, it seems to me that we're looking at a model of like, I went to the dentist last week and the dental hygienist cleaned my teeth, and then the dentist came in and told me how to read the x-rays. So if this is really gonna work, what you're talking about, restructuring for the consumer, you're gonna need to go to a model where if I wanna work with someone who has less education or less experience and I'm gonna pay less for it, or I'm gonna pay for more experience and more education and they're a member. Is that something you guys are willing to discuss? Is that really where you wanna go as an organization? Where you, in order to work for with somebody in that organization, there's actual education guidelines and more than just you pay a fee?
Barriers to entry, sort of.
First of all, us guys, I don't think we really have had any affiliation, formal affiliation with NAR. So wouldn't really be up to us. Now, one of the things that we've had this discussion in real estate for many years, and that is, let's make it more difficult to get a real estate license. Let's make it more difficult to sell real estate. Let's provide more education. Now, when I've been involved in those arguments, I would hear the other side, I'd hear the antitrust side of this. And where there were fears to if the people in the business try to close the door on the people outside the business. And so there are concerns beyond just what we have here when we're talking about upgrading the quality of the practitioner or the service to the practitioner or the service to the consumer. And so while we might try it, there's a whispering in the back where there's this fear of potential antitrust for creating barriers to entry.
How many people, the term raise the bar, there's a great Facebook group out there and lots of discussion about raise the bar. How many people think that the bar needs to be raised?
Not the brokerages.
Okay, so it won't happen in the current structure. It can't happen in the current structure. It can't. So that structure needs to change. And until it changes in a fundamental way, the bar will not be raised, and that hurts everybody.
Can't is too absolute.
Oh, let's get we got a question in the back. Brad.
Hi, I'm Kathy with Metrotex in Dallas. I've talked to the consumer who I had to deliver the news to that the person who's treated them unethically is not a realtor. And the licensing authority has referred them to us because they didn't break the licensing law. And there's nothing else they can do. They're stuck. So that's not a fun conversation to have with the consumer. They know what a realtor is and what is not, and they know who to call. So if you think the consumer's not in touch with what a realtor is, come sit at my desk.
Well, they didn't know. If they knew, they wouldn't have hired that person, right?
They didn't know. They knew to call me.
So they didn't know there was a difference when they hired the person that gave them a crappy experience. That's, I think, the problem, is that people assume that everybody who has a license is a realtor, which is sort of the issue. That's kind of what it's been watered down. And I wouldn't necessarily blame NAR for that. It's been sort of any more than you blame Kleenex for doing such a good job that it became synonymous with tissue, or Xerox, or whoever else. Brad, who else has got a question?
We're not holding them to a higher standard. So they are the same. There's a new
It's actually a question from the live stream. They're saying, why can't the bar be raised? Let's touch on it. Why can't the bar be raised?
Because politically, it becomes NAR owes its obligation to all of its members, and all of its members don't want the bar to be raised. Only a subset of its members want the bar to be raised.
So in the age of instant communication and people talking to one another and more people knowing about what's going on, I think the bar can be raised.
This guy looks like he's ready to go, Scott here.
Somebody gave me a mic. I'd like to raise the bar comments, which are fantastic. I just wanted to touch on what happened 20 minutes ago. After you guys just talked 20 minutes, I can't say I disagree with it. Most of it was pretty great. But the first thing you guys did is remove RPAC, which is our biggest value. In my opinion, probably 95% of the real value of a realtor. And you took that out and said, let's make this 5%, or that's my opinion of the 5%, let's make this, and if it's diminished or smaller, then we're doing something wrong. It needs to be fixed, I completely agree. I own an office in California. It's a weird situation to recruit and see what teams are doing and all kinds of stuff with ethics. But RPAC, to take RPAC out of the
If you say that RPAC is 95% of the value, is it 95% of the budget? No. So I mean, the point was to simply say, let's put aside the thing that there is general universal agreement that they're doing a good job on that, and let's focus on the thing where there's an issue. Because I agree with you. I mean, I think that RPAC does a really great job, and that's what everybody's really happy with. But if Bernard takes a much larger view of its scope than that, which is why we've been in that discussion.
Yeah, I would argue that some people don't know the value of that. That's the people I'm arguing
that's true.
are trying to fundraise from don't really see the value because it's not talked about as
And for full disclosure, because I'm the one that said that, I am a major donor.
Oh, I know.
The reason that I took, because I do think that that is a universal, and that when you ask the value, the lobbying effort is always, there's not an argument there. But you have to have the other part of it work in order to have an effective lobby.
You're done, Scott. You did good. We got a woman, or a gentleman right there, the tall, good-looking guy.
Hello. Hi, I'm someone working in real estate technology. So let's just say hypothetically, there's some changes coming. So what's your suggestion for us? What type of knowledge we should equip ourselves to better serve or better embrace this change from technology perspective? Thank you.
How can a technologist embrace, what advice can we give to people who are involved in technology in working through changes that might be coming? I think that one of the things I find with a lot of the people in technology, and I ran a couple technology companies myself, is that oftentimes when people come in to provide technology in the real estate industry, they don't know a whole lot about the real estate industry. And what happens is they start to get frustrated because there are barriers there to them that they didn't anticipate, they didn't understand were there. And so for anybody in technology, my advice to you would be to learn as much as you can about the operation of the organization and about the people in the seats, and talk to them as much as you can and include them if you can in your planning. But everybody, I think, in technology runs up against these barriers if they don't know how the industry works.
You want us to wrap up? Or you want to keep going? You're over the time. Oh yeah, we're pretty well over the time. Do you want to keep asking questions?
You got to move on.
Do we have another? We'll take one more.
I have 2 points I want to suggest. It's Anne-Marie DeCatsi from Charlotte, North Carolina. And Russ, to your point about we need to take the MLS out of the equation because that's the hook for realtor membership, I would also argue there's a lot of realtor associations who are using lockboxes and keys as a hook. And that needs to be discussed too. And then to the gentleman who talked about RPAC, North Carolina is one of a handful of states where you cannot use corporate money for a PAC. And if you look at our participation rate, it's abysmal because they have to use personal money. So I would agree. RPAC should not be the test, because if you took out the corporate dollars involved in RPAC, you would have very few realtor members, my guess, actually contributing to RPAC.
Any quick comments on that? Anything, feedback on that? All right, this was pretty hot, everybody. Some round of applause for our panel. Bringing up all these interesting issues.